everyone's got a lot of debt. All the corporations in America, plus the households, are 120% of GDP in debt, and the US government's 100% of GDP in debt. And they have
that's the one I want to talk about. So when I think about the US government and the amount of debt that we're carrying, and I think about interest rates being this high, is there a conversation? I know I'm asking you to prognosticate here, but is there a conversation going on between the US government and the Fed of like, hey, get ready to pull those rates down because they themselves have all this debt service that they're going to have to do?
Yes. And I think it's global. I've just been developing, I've written a lot of that. Sorry, I'm not finishing any sentence. I've just discovered something that really quite shocked me that I've been writing a lot about to get my thought process in Global Macro Investor. My understanding is that all debt that the US has borrowed above GDP growth, so if GDP grows at 2% and debt growth grows at 4%, everything above is only for financing interest payments since 2009, since the recession. And so that, all of that money is the exact same amount as the size of the Fed balance sheet. So they are issuing bonds to pay the interest. That's paying your credit card with another credit card, and then giving it to your dad and say, well, you settle the bill.
Whoa.
Which is the Fed. So I think they completely know what's going on. And I haven't really shared this with anybody yet. I also think it's global and it's understood. And it's all smoke and mirrors, that we never saw what the game was. And I think I've proven it, that this is all the central banks did. This is what quantitative easing. And step back is what am I talking about in this scrambled nonsense that I'm saying? The US, for easy maths, long-term trend rate of growth is 1.75%, but let's call it 2%. Interest rates have been average around 2%, let's say, for easy maths. And the government is 100% of GDP in debt. So therefore, their interest payments are 2% of the entire GDP, which is how much the economy grows. Okay, put that over there. Oh, but you guys in the private sector, you're also 100% of GDP in debt. Where does your 2% come from? Because GDP is all of the activity in the economy, and that's just gone to the government. Sorry, guys, you're either going to go bust, or we're going to blow up, and you're going to blow up the banking system, or we're going to have to keep eating this negative growth difference of 2% every year until you get rid of this debt, and we're all fucked. So once you realize that these two pools are both 100%, you realize, okay, somebody is going to have to do something so it ends up on the Fed balance sheet. So when you go to Japan, really interesting, because Japan, the households are massive savers. Companies are pretty in debt, but the government's massively in debt. And it's the same, but because their interest rates are lower, they can have more debt. But their economy grows really slow as well. So you get to a certain point, and then you have to say, right, it has to go into the balance sheet. The Europeans have been doing the same. The Brits have been doing the same. It's all the same thing. It's like it feels that, and this is going to sound ridiculous, it feels like there was a global treaty of which, okay, this is where we are. We can't, the debt has got too big, and nobody can pay the interest payments without destroying the global economy. So we're just going to have to pretend we're not debasing the currency and call it quantitative easing and say it's a precise way of injecting money exactly into the right part of the financial system. And it's like, no, what you're doing is getting a credit card to pay off your credit card and then giving it to your dad and say, you worry about this. It's not my problem.
Whoa. So I want to see if I'm tracking this, because not to get back into doom porn, but this seems pretty doom porny. Okay, so for people, but
it's not, because the world works. It's not doom porn because it works. Every time they do it,
working, or are we just pushing off a problem?
Okay, so it's making assets go up when they do it. It is meaning that companies don't default. The banking system remains sound.
But are
But
we
the rich get
actually able to
richer.
get out of debt? So let me make sure I'm understanding what you're saying. This is going to be very important. Okay, so I know we're using round numbers, but this is very helpful. So worldwide GDP, gross domestic product, the amount of productivity, so the capital that is usable effectively, you have two different people that have debt in that amount, which there's no one to have real money to pay the fucking thing off. So if you had one person that was like, okay, we're maxed out, we're at 2%, but GDP is 2%, cool. We have the path, just be frugal and you've got a path out of this. But when you have two people that owe the whole amount effectively, you now go into money printing. And I mean, if this works, I'm actually okay with it. I know how that's going to get me lit up. But so the solution here is, okay, we have two large groups, governments, private sector, which are all the groups that exist. And each one of them owes the entire worldwide GDP in debt. You can't both be in that situation. There's no Peter, you can't rob a Peter to pay Paul because they're both in the same situation. So now the only thing left is printing money, devaluing everybody to get out of the situation. But the way in which we do that, by buying things from the private sector, is we're making people that hold assets wealthier. We're increasing the gap between the rich and the poor, because the way that we inject money into the system only reaches people that own assets. And so we've created this problem, and the only way out is to print money, which is going to increase the Gini coefficient, for people that know that phrase, where it's like, nobody cares in absolute dollars how much you have. You just hate that your neighbor Timmy has more than you. And so you freak the fuck out. And so it becomes the differential that becomes the destabilizing element. So what you said, assuming what I just repeated is correct, that sounds destabilizing and doom porn. So
what is the other outcome?
Social media has already changed the world. You should be using it everywhere in your business that you can, including within your social media strategy. And if you're not, you are falling behind. Opus Clip is how you're going to catch up fast. Opus Clip is an AI tool designed to streamline your video content strategy. It turns long-form videos into short, social media-ready clips automatically. At Impact Theory, we've integrated it into our workflow, and it's making a difference. Our social media team uses it to create digestible clips from our shows, saving time, helping us maintain a consistent social presence, and just find the best parts of an interview. But you don't have to take my word for it. For the next few weeks, you can try Clip Anything, Opus Clip's flagship product, for free. Efficient video marketing can make or break your business. If you're curious about how an AI can enhance your content strategy, click the link in the show notes to start your free trial of Clip Anything so you can see it directly for yourself.
The other outcome is let it all burn.
Clearly a terrible idea.
When you're this far in debt, let it all burn doesn't work anymore. Right? That's the kind of end of civilization stuff, ultra doom porn. So you're faced with doom porn and ultra doom porn. What do you take?
God.
Right, there is no other way. So this is what people need to understand. What is GDP? GDP is a sum of all the economic activity that goes on. And it's comprised, GDP growth rates are comprised very simply of the number of people in your economy. Is it growing? If it's growing, your economy grows because there's more people generating more activity, generally. Secondly, is how much productivity does it have? Are those people productive? Do they make a lot of stuff for each man hour? And finally, is how fast is debt growing? So when we have an aging population, the number of humans declines over time. What happens is we stopped immigration almost everywhere because everyone was under pressure for income. because real wages haven't gone up. So we lowered the rate of immigration, so that lowers trend rate of growth. Aging population, they're less productive and they spend less. So GDP keeps doing this for decades on end, baked in the cake from that. They become less productive because they're older people and a whole bunch of them aren't in the labor force anymore. Okay, so you're not very productive, you're getting old, not population growing. So guess what? Bingo, answer, debt. Ding, 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 ding. We just took on debt. Right. It was rational until it's not. It's like it's rational to super leverage yourself on a house and house prices go up and you look like a god until you get it wrong and you lose everything. So it was rational to take the debt, and this is where we got to. And then it was the government's got into the same boat and everyone was just the debt. So now the debt is the debt. Debt growth is actually not that high anymore because we've hit the ceiling. So the only way to solve this goes back to our earlier conversation, is we cannot solve population growth. And debt growth has peaked out. So we've got the one thing in the middle called productivity. And that takes us right back to AI and the robots and cryptocurrencies, Internet of Things, green energy, all of these things. So if you are governments, look what Europe's doing. It's interesting. And maybe I'm just inventing a narrative. But Europe, the US, Japan, they all know what they're doing. So they're printing money to cover their bills. And Europe thinks, well, Christ, we need to get the bloody economy going here because GDP growth is what pays our bills. And it's pretty sluggish because everyone's old here and everyone's in debt and the banking system's a mess. Let's do a double whammy, which is what the US did back in the 40s. Let's put as much stimulus as we can from this fake money and ram it into the green energy sector. And we're going to build a lot of stuff. And we understand a lot of stuff is going to be wasted capital, but out of it, we're going to do one amazing thing, and it will happen, is out of this, energy costs will collapse. Now, this is really important for people to understand. What does technology do? Technology drives more productivity out of a single unit of energy. Kind of, once you see this thing, it's like that's what humans do with everything. It's like find a way of extracting more for that barrel of oil, because that's what we use. Now, that barrel of oil has been our fixed energy source since we replaced whale oil. So we've been using this. And so it's been the constant. So technology's had to drive all the productivity in every way it can based on how much is this. So we've had to bring computational power down, everything down, so that one fixed thing, which is the price of oil, which on a inflation-adjusted basis has been pretty stable for the last 70, 80 years. And if what the US is doing with its Inflation Act and the Europeans are doing with its green energy and Japan is doing and China's doing and Australia's doing and the UK's doing, if they force enough investment in, they will change the energy source of the world. And because all of these have exponential downtrends in cost, we will change the energy coefficient. And what happens is productivity times the lowering the cost of energy is an exponential change for all of us. That's how you solve this. There's almost no other way of solving this problem of slow GDP growth, old populations, massive debts, without blowing up everything. So you're going to have to keep doing this money printing thing, which is miserable because it makes some people rich and other people poor. Or you can have inflation, which just makes everybody miserable. They're all terrible things. But the faster you can get to changing that productivity equation, the better, because it's the only way. There's simply no other way of solving it. You either rob from everybody or grow the economy
with a declining population. So talk to me about the energy. You're saying that, so maybe I have just an undereducated view on the green energy front. So you see the cost of energy coming down as we invest more and more into the green energy side?
Yes. So right now we're in transition where we're not probably producing enough oil and we don't have enough energy coming out of solar, wind, geothermal, nuclear, all of that. So, we've got this market where energy prices are high because of supply issues and other stuff. But when you look at the trend, all of these are growing as a percentage share of the energy grid. There's still oil and coal are still massive, right? But they're coming down, and Europe's really forcing it, decarbonisation. And so we're seeing a rise of these others. They start, some of them subsidised, but the subsidies go over time. But the really interesting thing is none of that. It's the fact that the cost per unit of energy keeps coming down. And many of these are now cheaper than natural gas, which was very cheap. So it's like, okay. And we've only just started where we are in this exponentiality. So my view is, in 20 years' time, the cost of energy will be marginal for everybody and everything, much like the cost of water is marginal for everybody. And the cost of many things we take for granted are totally marginal.
Now, I don't know if, given your macro outlook, that this is a reasonable question to ask you or not, but when you look out at the rate of adoption of green energy, do you think that because you just said like maybe we're not producing enough oil and gas, do you think that we're moving too rapidly in that direction? Or do you think, no, you make these huge investments, you have to put regulation in place, force people to do it faster because these have a far more technology-based exponential.
Okay, so this is the inverse of the GDP problem. Do you manage its smooth decline, or do you blow up? Here, do you transition slowly with the issues of climate change and the issues of cost of energy and all these other things and the need for productivity? Or do you blow up? Do you just take short-term pain to get to the promised land faster? Again, it's probably a rational economic decision to do that. So maybe or maybe not energy prices rise. I'm not entirely sure. Will copper prices rise? Probably. Will some prices rise? Probably. Can that be offset by AI and other deflationary pressures? Probably. It's not baked in the cake. People always conflate some commodity going up in price to see inflation's back and it's all going to run rampant again. It's very rare that happens. We've just had it now, so it's going to be in everybody's head as the boogie monster. But they're usually looking at the wrong boogie monster. So it's going to be a balancing act. Maybe they get it right, maybe they get it wrong, but I think most of these governments are pretty sure that they want to do it as fast as they can. And so does that mean that they would, if by their actions they cause high energy prices for 5 years, would they give out stimulus handouts to people? Probably. Is that not the best way to say, listen, if you are getting hurt by this, and guess what? That's exactly what Europe's just done last year. It was giving handouts to people to say, look, we understand your electricity bill is high and it's hard for you, so we'll help you. Now, did that drive inflation to some extent? Maybe, but maybe not. I mean, it was just going for the electricity bill. You didn't give people extra money in their pocket. So it's complicated, as everything is, but I don't know. I'm a fan of, if you're going to go for positive change, do it as fast as possible. If you're going to go to negative change and you can glide path, take the glide path.
Very interesting. So,
and I'm not a fan of quantitative easing or any of that stuff. I'm just like, this evil. Which one do you want to choose?
Yeah, it is a very interesting question. So when you were talking, I was in full acknowledgement of the human mind goes to the problems. In the context we're in now, and I am not a geopolitical thinker, and so I want to be very clear about that. I want people to understand that I am seeking to increase the island of my knowledge. When I look at, as somebody who has studied from a how do evil people get control perspective, studied what Hitler did in World War II, he was very much like not seeing the increase in productivity path out of things. And so he's like, well, for Germany to get out from under this terrible weight, we have to start land grabbing. And when I see Russia...
That is the population part of the equation. right? When you're taking over countries, what you're actually doing is getting their people and resources. So you're solving for your own population, productivity, more resources, but you're actually getting the people part of the GDP equation.
That's interesting. So, how do you contextualize Russia and the Ukraine in this moment where you've got the private sector, the governments are completely indebted, you're at a position where birth rates are declining, certainly in the Western world, very rapidly. If demographics are destiny and we are just in a shit show demographically, does that, when you were talking, I started looking at the Russia-Ukraine thing in a totally different light. And I'm very much somebody on the outside of that. I'm not close to it at all. But I'm very curious if that sort of recontextualization of, oh, this is somebody who's like, well, I know how to solve this problem quite rapidly. Or am I looking at it wrong?
I don't like geopolitics because so much of it is stuff that we don't know. So there's so much conjecture about almost everything in geopolitics, apart from the fact that Russian troops are in Ukraine and they're fighting each other. Whose motivations of what, for what, and how, I don't even know. But one thing it did do, to go back to what we were talking about, it accelerated Europe. Everyone thought, well, the Europeans are going to back away from their green energy policy now, aren't they? The Europeans went, no, fuck you. We're now super motivated to get this done as fast as possible because we do not want to be beholden to Russia or the United States or anybody else for that matter. Energy independence is an incredible thing, right? It's one of the superpowers that the United States has energy independence. All other energy on Earth could go, and the US has oil and gas, and more of it than pretty much anybody else in the world. So it also, if you think about the history of war and how much has been fought over the Middle East, not because we want some sand or the few people, it's because we want the energy. And we want to control it because the energy is the thing. I can't remember what it was called in Dune, but whatever the thing is, right? Humans want to control the thing, whether it was whale oil or this or whatever, the thing.
Spice, right? In Dune?
Spice, that's right, spice. So that's what the US controls. And the Russia controls a bunch of it. And we want to change that equation. And the Europeans are in the middle with not enough of it. And it's in everybody's interest for everybody to walk away from this one commodity ruling the world. Because it's not the commodity we care about, it's the energy we care about.
Well said. Talk to me about China. Seemed for a while like things were getting pretty dicey. You had people, if it can be believed, people protesting like crazy, governments making funds unavailable to people. I saw that happen in Cyprus up close, given that Lisa's family is from Cyprus. What's the status of things?
China's economy was slowing down and they locked themselves into a really brutal lockdown for the pandemic. And even the Chinese people who are quite compliant, Asian populations tend to be more societally compliant than US, who kind of like saying fuck you to everybody if it doesn't suit their interests. So, Europeans are quite societally minded as well, generally speaking. So the Chinese asked too much of their people for whatever reason. I don't know whether it was actually for a real reason in the end or whether it's for autocratic reasons or whatever. Anyway, economic growth falls off a cliff. People are angry. Growth is weakening. Property markets a mess. That's one of the big wealth gates for everybody in China. That's where people make money. People in the streets and people are angry. The Chinese have kind of, interesting enough, started stimulating. And then, they locked up all these entrepreneurs and threw them in prison or threw them down a well. They're now like, well, we've decided we need to be growing at 5.5% a year and we want entrepreneurs back in, and they've reopened Hong Kong for cryptocurrency. So it feels like whatever they were doing, they've got what they wanted, whether it was because she wanted to get control again. The Game of Thrones is not a game that I like to get involved in, and because everybody speculates, we don't know. All I know, Chinese are stimulating. They want the economy to grow, and they seem to want to be an entrepreneur. I don't know why you choose to be an entrepreneur in China, because the next cycle around, you get shot and replaced by the next one, but somebody's going to do it.
That's interesting. I didn't know that they had reopened back up. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So again, think about mentality. We're at the bottom. This is the worst. Markets forward looking, our Chinese stock market's up like 50% already. And they're driving parts of the global cycle. So when you read it in the news headlines, it's usually too late.
No doubt. No, I didn't realize that they had opened Hong Kong back up for crypto. What do you think about the general state of crypto? Is this crypto? Like I have heard people now, it's AI has become like the new hot girl, and all that energy that was in crypto is the future. It's going to change everything. Web3, oh my God, is now like, nah, that's whatever. AI is where it's at. How do you see crypto? Where's this going? Is this a temporary downturn and we boom back up?
Literally nothing's changed since I last came to talk to you about it. I said it bottomed then, and I still think it's bottomed. And 6 months later, it's bottomed, and some of these are up 100% plus from the low. The global liquidity cycle, the forward-looking indicators, had turned up a while ago. So, and the business cycle will get through the trough and through the other side. So, crypto's going up. Now, does it go up straight? Does it have some volatility? I don't know, but it seems pretty good so far. It just seems to go up, do a bit sideways, go up, do a bit sideways. At some point, there'll be a bit of a reasonable down. Everyone will be like, oh my God, and then it'll keep going up. So, there is no free money. You take risk with crypto. I'm super comfortable. All I speak to is giant brands, giant people. Just had a great interview on Real Vision with the two of the heads of institutional business at Coinbase, what they're building out, the kind of people they're speaking to. I'm seeing on the other side, everybody from car companies to sports teams to music companies, all looking at the space. We're looking at, what we're building at Real Vision, what you're building, what is going on, how vibrant the community is in a bear market. I'm seeing consolidation. I'm seeing the regulatory fight happening. We're seeing court cases finally going through, like the Grayscale and the Ripple case, where people will eventually get the SEC into a place where it is acceptable. But I always said this, they will always push too far. Everybody's job is to push back, and they'll get somewhere in the middle.
If you like that clip, check out the full powerful episode here, and I'll see you there.